If you've ever wondered, how do I start a counseling business? Well, you've come to the right place. And over the next few minutes, we'll go through and talk about that. As entrepreneurs and business owners, we know that if we have a clear plan, anything becomes possible. And if you can have a clear plan, a clear process to create that plan, and a way to create clarity with your partner or spouse, you can drive to amazing heights. So when it comes to starting a counseling business, we're going to hit 4 high-level areas in the next few minutes. The first is we're going to go through and help and discuss ways to make sure you're clearly defining why. What are your motivations? And what will your business look like? What does success look like for you once you've created this business? 2, we want to make sure that we're defining what is it you do? What will you be doing better than anybody else? Who is your niche going to be and how do we define that? The third, how do we very safely, confidently, but safely and without a lot of money, create a team of advisors? And lastly, how would we start and create our roadmap? And just so you know, towards the end of the video, I'll give you a kicker on this, but I'll introduce you to a place where you can go and actually learn how to do all of these things together. There's a course that we have for that. So I started my first of 16 companies when I was 19. I built them, bought them, sold them, and wrecked them. I have worked with hundreds and hundreds of business leaders and helped build hundreds and hundreds of companies. This is my wheelhouse. So when it comes to doing these things, one of the primary things that we always start with is, what is your motivation? Why are you looking to do this? What is it that matters to you? And it sounds really silly, but it's probably the cornerstone of all of this. Because people are like, well, I hate my job. Okay, do you hate your job or do you hate your boss? What are the aspects that you like about your job? What are the aspects you don't like about your job? Because sometimes we don't want you to jump from, out of the frying pan and into the fire. We want you to be clear on what are the motivations. And in my book, this was my first book, The Aspiring Solopreneur. You can get that on Amazon, but it helps you walk through step by step by step on defining what are these motivations. Because if your motivation, we want to make sure they're healthy. Maybe you're just in a bad job and you should move to a different job and that'll make you happy. But maybe it is the right thing to do. And from a counseling perspective, oddly, my wife has gone through this. At one point, she was an accountant for a venture capital firm, and she chose later in life to completely upend all of that and become a couples and family counselor. So I know this space intimately, all the way through on how that works. Now, she chose what was it that she wanted to be? Where did she want to go? And for my wife, Rika, she realized that ultimately where she wanted to be was she wanted to be able to help people. She really enjoyed and liked the idea of counseling, but she was going to have to go back to school. And she was British, so we had to figure out the whole school thing from England to here, which was a pain in the butt, but worth it. She ended up having to go back and get her master's degree. Fair enough. Then she had to get, in the state of Nebraska where we initially practiced, she needed 3,000 hours to work underneath somebody before she could go out and hang her own shingle. So understanding that this was going to be about a 6-year journey for her was well worth it, but she needed to find where did she want to go down the road. Now today, Rika works, she's probably around a couple $100 an hour. She works with 15 to 20 clients a week. She only works about 3 days a week. We live up in the high country of Colorado where she gets to do her endurance runs. She does 50-mile runs and we ski and things like that. And she loves that. But she was able to really clearly define where she wanted to be. Now sometimes that in and of itself can be, man, that's scary as hell. How do I figure that out? That people's heads explode. I want more money, I want more time. Okay, and that's great, but there are other pieces with it. If you say, I want to go to every one of my daughter's soccer games, or I want to make sure that I have the ability to exercise for 3 hours every morning, or I want to be able to take 2 months off a year. All of these things are very possible, but what I'm going to encourage is if you can start with that end in mind to find the motivation of where you want to go and what amazing looks like for you, then you're going to be able to start stepping back into figuring out what type of counseling practice do we need. Where do we even want to live? Because the regulations and rules are different in every state, state by state. So if you like, you can go to our site, theaspiringsolopreneur.com, and we have a tool called the Balance Wheel. It takes about 6 minutes, and it'll give you immediate results, but it's a holistic assessment of your entire life, of where you are, And it can help you define, okay, great, for each one of these quadrants within the balance wheel, where do I want to be in my finances? Okay, fair enough. Where do I want to be in my relationships with family or friends or my spouse? Where do I want to be with my health, my physical, mental, and spiritual health? Having those identified is going to then help you define what type of business you really want to build. This is important. People say, well, dude, it doesn't matter. It's like, no, this is actually the cornerstone, because if you don't know where you're going, then you can end up creating a whole different life. You can end up creating another business, and all you're doing is chasing other stuff, and that is not going to help you with it. So, on a side note, a little bonus piece here, making sure that you're clear on this, and there's ways, and we can talk about this in other places, in other videos on this channel, but we want to make sure that you're coordinating with your partner. If you have a partner, your spouse, making sure that we're creating champions to help support to achieve those dreams, rather than saboteurs that sometimes will dig in and bite us in the butt. How can we create that? So our first step is really defining those motivations, and then clearly sharing those motivations with partners if you have one, making sure that you're creating champions. And we talk about these in other videos on this channel in more detail. Now the second thing is we want to define what you do. When we talk about what we're defining what you do, I love to paraphrase from this old hippie singer in the 60s named Jerry Garcia, who was the lead singer of the Grateful Dead. And with Jerry Garcia, he was brilliant at marketing. And to paraphrase his quote, the goal isn't to be the best at what you do. The goal is to be the only one who does what you do. And if you can start to look at life that way, and you can step back and start thinking about what are the unique skills I currently have, or maybe what are the unique skills that I have today, but I'm going to need to augment with other tools or other skills or other pieces that then combined together makes you very unique in who you're going after. There's a saying that says riches are in the niches, but the more you can be focused and narrowed down on where you're going, the better. So Rika happens to be married to a serial entrepreneur. She's owned her own businesses in the past. She's worked for a venture capital firm. She's been an accountant. She speaks accountant. So Rika happens to be highly sought after for business owners who are looking for counseling, or for couples who own businesses and work together. It's a very unique niche, and she gets comped pretty well for it. But when we start to figure these things out, it helps you start to clarify, okay, I know my motivations. Now, how can I start to clarify what is it that I do better than anybody else, and start working into that area? And there's ways to test this, and there's ways to test it without spending any money. And it's beautiful. It is so easy to do this without spending money. It's never, ever been easier to start a business than it is today. So with this, there's ways, and we talk about this in other videos, on how it is you can go in and actually test your market. How can you reach and do research and market analysis? There's a ton of different ways while you're still employed at your existing gig before you decide, I want to step out and start building this. Now the third thing, so we've talked about defining your motivations. The second was defining what you do. And the third then is going to be, how do you go about creating a team of advisors? And when we talk about advisors, these are people who are experts in their field, and their job is to make you successful. Now, a lot of times people are like, well, I just want to start a small business, man. What is your deal? I want to start a counseling practice. That wigs me out. But it doesn't have to. Because you know what? When we go through it and we actually talk about how do you find a great accountant who's a small business accountant who can be your coach and say, here's how this is, and here's how they can suggest what are the legal entities or our structure that you should have to be safe. You can then talk to an insurance person who understands small business and counseling. Great. You know what? You need to have this error and omission insurance. You need to have this, or what are the insurances you need to have? Wonderful. Then you can talk to an attorney and say, well, should I have my own? Do I run this as a subchapter S, small corporation, which are easy to set up? I've done dozens of them. Or should I run this as a sole proprietor? You can go and talk to a marketing person. You can talk to a banker. There's a whole variety of people that you can talk to. And remember, these people are all small business owners too. And it's their job. You're part of their business development. They will invest 30 minutes to an hour, and we talk about this in all the other videos, on what are some of the great questions to ask, how can you help them, and they're going to start answering, and they'll ask questions. And when you think about it, if you can practice, the good Lord gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. If you can listen twice as much as you speak and ask lots and lots of questions, they're going to help you all day long. They will bend over backwards to help you be successful, because the more successful you are, the longer term of the relationship with them, and it's going to be good for their business. So your being successful helps them. And this creates all sorts of other relationships, introductions, and there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can actually ask for this. Now, the last thing that we're going to talk about is building a roadmap. Now, some people would call this a business plan. Some people, you call it whatever you want. I have built hundreds of them. When it comes to building a roadmap, a guide map, it is intended to facilitate you digging in and asking more questions. Ultimately, when you create a great roadmap, you're going to start going through and you'll see all the different steps. You're looking for blind spots. You're trying to figure out what are those areas I don't understand, and then find out who can help me. Always be thinking about who can do it, not how do I do it. You don't need to do everything. You just have to be accountable to make sure that everything is happening. So as you start building that in more and more and more and more for each one of these steps, well, you'll start being able to fill out your roadmap more and more. You're going to actually be able to go out and start talking with clients or potential clients. You may be able to go talk with other counselors who already are out there. And counseling is a great example. Rika doesn't work with kids, and Rika doesn't work with sex addiction. She doesn't work with drugs or alcohol addiction. So when she has people who reach out to her, hey, she's more than happy to refer those people away. And the fact that she's an expert in business and couples, people are more than happy to refer people to her. So it ends up being, how can you help each other when you start having that abundant mindset? When you start thinking more, hey, how can I help everybody? How can I be successful by helping others? A rising tide raises all ships. When you start to do that, amazing things can happen. So with this, starting with clearly defining what is that motivation, making sure it's a healthy motivation and you're clear with where you want to go. And then second is defining what you do. What do you do better than anybody else in the world? Third, how do you create that team of advisors and start then finally smoking out that and building that roadmap. So at the beginning, I promised that there'd be a little kicker here at the end. And if you go to the aspiringsolopreneur.com, there is an entire course filled with videos that goes through step by step by step by step on how to do this. Now, candidly, you can watch a lot of the videos here on the YouTube channel and you can read the book, and you're going to get most of what you need out of that, and you're going to be able to have your success. But the most important thing is, remember, make sure when you decide to jump. Entrepreneurs, people say, oh, entrepreneurs are big risk takers. They're not. Entrepreneurs are willing to take very, very calculated risks. But of the 16 companies I've created, only one got clobbered. And that was because I got in an argument with Google, and you can't fight God. So with that, the point is when you get ready to pull the trigger, you will know without a doubt that it's a no-brainer. It's like, yep, this is the best thing in the world. And you can very safely and very methodically step into that next space. So if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to this channel. Look for any other videos that may be of value, and if we can be of any help at all, please don't be afraid of reaching out. Thank you for investing the time. Keep smiling.